Good evening, ladies and gents. It is Friday night, 9 o'clock, as always, and myself, Kevin Wells, and this guy,
Jay Mack.
Jay Mack. As always, tonight we're bringing you a special episode. As you've all seen throughout the week, we've kind of been on the promotion wagon, making sure you guys know about it. From the trailer, I was really excited to check this movie out. It had such a, as Doug Curtis would say, an enchanting feeling. You know that when something's shot just so well that it kind of invites you in, even just the visuals of it. And I got that from the trailer. Today we talk about Lapwing, the movie that was released today. J Mac, you and I watched it today. I mean, what was your overall just summary?
It wasn't summary. It's I mean, in all honesty, it's a pretty kind of bleak story. But it draws you in, and like you just said, it is absolutely gorgeous to look at. Considering this is essentially a small independent film, a lot of time and effort has gone into the way it looks and sounds. I mean, we know that getting the sound right on these things can be an absolute nightmare, especially when you're open to the elements. So no, they did a great job. It was
what I loved about it as well is they're a very small cast. Like there's not many people in this movie, but yet you're there and you're kind of on the edge. You're waiting to see what happens. You're invested. I'm really
it's kind of like that Bone Tomahawk movie, you know, where you feel like you're actually on the journey with people. You almost feel like you get to know them throughout the film, as it says like that. It's not like Bone Tomahawk in many other ways, but it is in that way.
I could have the character Patience. I found myself really warming up to Patience.
Very quickly.
And by the way, and she was a mute, right? But one of the really inviting parts of that is I kind of felt like I wanted to get in there and protect her, right? Until the end, then you're like, well, she don't need. But what I think is amazing though is how that actress Hannah Douglas was able to convey how she was feeling without saying a word.
Yeah, that's only the best actors can do that.
So I'm looking forward to talking about it. So what we're going to do, we're not going to matter on too much. I'm going to play the trailer for all you watching at home. Make sure you go and check it out on Amazon Prime. It's on Sky Movies. You can get it on Apple TV, everywhere. Just go search Lapwing. It's in selected cinemas also. So here is the trailer, and then we're going to go on and get Laura.
Down in yonder green field, down, hey down, hey down.
The boat will be coming in the beginning of the month. Camp down on the beach. These marshes are ours.
Eliza Knight's laying under his shield with a down.
You stay away from us. Do you hear?
His arms they lie down at his feet.
I am pleased to meet you.
So well they can their master keep.
You're a bad girl, Patience. But then again, you already know that, don't you?
Come on, Patience. You can see it.
With a down, derry, 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 down,
It's all right. You shouldn't have done that. I should have stopped him. She's coming with us! There's something about you, Patience. He can't control you. Don't do anything silly, Patience. Go! Back to your people! And it makes him sick. Drives him mad. Maybe it would drive any man mad.
Look at me! Why won't you stand up to him?
We burn the devil out. You.
Maybe it is this place. Maybe we're all cursed.
Outstanding, ladies and gentlemen, Laura Turner. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi guys, thanks so much for having me.
That's absolutely our pleasure. We saw this trailer back when we'd kind of seen it on like a release. We keep up with everything that's coming out. We actually mentioned it in a show where we were looking at up and coming releases, and we seen this trailer and straight away was like, wow. You can sometimes tell with an independent movie that it's independent, if you know what I mean. there's a
Yeah.
feel to it where you're like, of course it's independent, but the content carries it forward. With this, you wouldn't really know, just based on how cinematic it is and how, like I said earlier, there's an enchantment. It was actually Tibor Takis, the Hollywood director, who he created a movie called The Gate we had on it. And I said to him before, I was like, there's a certain element in movies that you don't get now, and it's that feel. Stranger Things has it, where you watch something and you almost feel like you want to live there, and kind of feels like that with this. Obviously, I mean, you don't want to live there.
Yeah, I mean, pros and cons, really.
Well, depending on who you are.
True,
I think it's more like just pros and David.
yeah, I mean, David's the main one, really, isn't he?
Yeah, well, yeah. And by the way, I mean, that's one thing I'd called J Mac today and kind of said, like, the casting in this was phenomenal. Like, just, I mean, Hannah and Emmett, like, together. Emmett's such. I always say, and I've said this throughout our whole 3 years of being on a podcast, that in order to care about the protagonist, you need to have a really good bad guy. And I think
completely.
You absolutely created that. And I think for you, did Emmett bring that to life from what you had written on the script to that?
Very much so, yeah. And I really agree with what you just said about, I think the strength of a protagonist really does come from the strength of the antagonist that they're up against, because, the stronger you make the arguments that are in the mouths of your antagonist, the harder the protagonist has to fight in order to, work against those effectively and to combat them in the end, and that's also the challenge for Patience as well, the fact that she is a non-verbal woman, so she has a stammer, she has a speech impediment, and because of that she's selectively mute. So there's a lot there was always going to be a lot of questions, I think, raised in their relationship around the power dynamic and the way that power is constructed and passed between the two of them. And actually, I think something that's really interesting about Patience as a character, and very much is something that Hannah Douglas, who plays Patience, really brought to life incredibly, was the fact that her power actually resides often in the fact that she doesn't speak, that she doesn't feel the need to fill the silence in the way that we sometimes do. And it's actually her silence that often drives David crazy, because it's kind of not what he expects. But in terms of Emmett, absolutely. I mean, we always knew that David was going to be a really tough role to fill, to find the person who could bring that role to life in a way that felt convincing and didn't feel like somebody going kind of completely down a very, very villainous route. It's always been important to me, I think, in my writing and in the pieces of work that I've admired and enjoyed, that every character feels psychologically viable in some way. And, they might be deeply troubling and deeply kind of difficult characters to understand, and to, we might not be able to relate to them in our sort of everyday day-to-day lives. But I think there has to be something there where we can kind of get a little bit under their skin and understand their psychology in some way. And, I think that's absolutely what Emmett brought to David. He brought a whole new level of complexity to the role that, is kind of more than I'd ever really imagined or dreamed that, we'd be able to achieve with the casting. And then, with such a short shoot as well. It was a 16-day shoot. So it was an incredible, and Emmett wasn't on set for every one of those days. He was actually busy filming another project at the same time. So he was kind of here and there. And moving between, this project and another very different role. And I just think, the skill and the nuances that he brought to that role just really helped to lift everything, I think, about those dynamics between all of the characters, absolutely between Patience and David, but also between Lizzie and David. Sarah Whitehouse, who plays Lizzie, is an incredible actress. She brings such a kind of intelligence to the role of Lizzie, and an emotional intelligence that I think is for me is kind of a really interesting sort of weight to the story as well. I think, you know, the different representations of femininity, of womanhood, and also just of, you know, human beings. It really is, you know, the female voice and the female experience was always going to be central to the story, but it also is just about what is it like to be a person in, especially in a very isolated you know, situation, and the kind of the toxicity that explodes within that situation, because, you know, that's very much fueled by the fact that they're so isolated from the rest of the world. And it's that you know, it feels like that kind of pressure cooker sense of, in this very barren, bleak place, it's sort of like anything can happen, and lots of things do. Lots happens.
What was your initial inspiration for kind of bringing this story together?
Yeah, it was kind of a series of a few different things that kind of came into place, really. I mean, I love that you guys you know, were kind of mentioning the way the landscape, even in the trailer, and the sense of the scale of the place where we shot the film, which is on the Lincolnshire coast, which is where I'm from. And it had always been a landscape that I, you know, my whole life I've kind of always felt very inspired by. And so I was very keen to write something set in that landscape. And I'd started collaborating already with the director, Philip Stevens, who's also based in the same area. And, you know, we've got very similar kind of passions in terms of telling stories about the present through the lens of the past, which, you know, was very much something we wanted to do with Lapwing. And then, you know, evoking these incredible settings that, you know, are still so underrepresented on screen. And it just kind of felt mad that we've got these incredible, bleak but kind of beautiful endless landscapes just sort of on our back door, really. So I knew very clearly that I wanted to set something there, and I knew very clearly as well that I wanted it to be a period drama. You know, I've always loved period drama, and as I say, there's something really exciting for me about using the metaphors of the past to enable us to kind of reflect on where we are today, and to hopefully, you know, ask the questions of, okay, how far have we come, but perhaps how far have we still got to go in terms of some of these, you know, some of these issues that are really at the heart of Lapwing, in terms of you know, the oppression of anybody who's different, anything that kind of relates or amounts to a perception of otherness in some people's eyes, and then the toxic masculinity as well, and the experience of trauma, you know, I think, and how damaging trauma and isolation can be to, you know, characters like David, who, yes, they are, you know, he is very much the antagonist of the piece, but, you know, as I was saying before about Emmett's performance, he brings a complexity to that role that I hope kind of allows us to unlock some of those more complex questions about, you know, what does it really mean to be an individual in a difficult situation, and to make choices, and to, you know, sometimes we make the right choices and sometimes we make the wrong choices. And, you know, David is a bit of a kind of lesson, as it were, in somebody who continually perhaps makes the wrong choices. You know, sometimes he thinks he's doing it for the right reasons. I think as well that's part of the kind of interest for me about him, is that, you know, he comes from he's got such a skewed perspective on what is right, and he's so adamant in his own viewpoints and his own opinions that the terrible actions that he sometimes takes come from a place of complete necessity. So these were all kind of themes and issues that I was very interested to explore. And then one day I basically just got an image of a woman covered in blood, in a kind of Tudor dress, and basically
nice.
yeah, absolutely. You know, why not? Like, it's the cheery things that sometimes inspire you, isn't it? And I just sort of knew from that point it was interesting. I knew as well that it was going to be a story about sisters, and, you know, the relationship between Patience and Lizzie was something that became more and more integral to the story, as, you know, then the journey really kind of began of developing it with Phil Stevens, the director. It was initially going to be a short film, but we actually kind of, you know, we started sort of pitching it and chatting to people about it, and the reaction was very much, oh, it sounds great, but like you can never do that on the budget of a short film. And so I think we went, oh, okay, well, that's just made us even more determined to make it. And you know what? We're going to make it as a feature, not just a short film. So that probably speaks to the madness of the indie filmmaking industry.
How involved were you in the actual kind of filming process and everything? Obviously, you wrote the thing. But sometimes people just, like, especially in the mainstream movie world, they write the movie, they sell it, and they pass it on. But I'm assuming you had a heavier hand in the making of this one.
Yeah, I think that's, that's what's so wonderful about working with, not just with Phil, the director, but with Justin and Andy, who are the other producers on the piece, that it really has been, Lapwing has been such a kind of team and ensemble effort right from the start. The sort of collaboration between myself and Phil was really the thing that, made us want to do Lapwing. We knew we wanted to work together. We knew that actually the way that we both hoped our careers would move forward was to be writing stories together and to be creating worlds and characters together and going on that journey. So yeah, it was absolutely wonderful. Like, as you say, I work on a lot of other projects now as a writer, where it is a lot more that kind of stereotype of, you sit at home and you do your writing and you have a certain amount of back and forth when you're kind of redrafting the script, but then it really is a sort of handover and your job is done. And what was lovely about Lapwing was being able to go onto set, in the lead up, being part of some of the, creative conversations that were happening, being able to go to location scouting, just being involved with all the different elements of the process, and that continued into post-production as well. There were conversations between myself and Phil, and Alistair, the editor, and many other members of the creative team about, kind of tricky creative decisions that we needed to make, because there were some tough choices to make once we got to the edit as well, because we had a lot of footage, but knew that we wanted it to come in at under 90 minutes. So yeah, that meant making some changes and some compromises in terms of the story and what we kept and what we didn't keep. And it's kind of a writer's dream, really, to be able to still be involved with some of those conversations, and not have it done for you. It was just wonderful to be part of that.
Yeah, it's your baby at the end of the day, so you kind of want to see it grow and nurtured into the thing it's going to be. Will there be a physical release of Lapwing? Because I was thinking there, when you're saying there's so much footage, there's so much, obviously, special features that could go into something. I mean, do you think that's a possibility, that there'll be a release?
Interesting. I mean, yeah, I think it would, it'd be fantastic if some of that, some of that extra footage that's out there could be kind of available for people who want to see it and to have a watch. It's an interesting one, because I guess really, today's release day, but it's kind of the start of the journey now. It's just a different part of the journey, and I think there's going to be a lot of, other avenues for us to explore in the kind of coming weeks and months. But yeah, I mean, at the moment, the focus is kind of on cinemas and on demand, but also, us getting the opportunity to go and do Q&As at some of the cinemas. We've done a couple already. We had our sort of world premiere at Leeds International Film Festival, which was great to, just start to get to kind of meet audiences and start to, really have those conversations about how people are responding to the film and gauging what that response is going to be going forwards. And I think it's always wonderful as a creative, getting the opportunities to chat about your process and about, what you wanted to achieve and why you wanted to. So that I'm really enjoying that at the moment. We've got another one coming up in London on Sunday, which is, I think going to be a really, really nice opportunity to sort of dig deeper into some of the material that sits in the background of the story and the characters.
Yeah. Do you have plans to travel up to Scotland by any chance?
I mean, I would love to. Yeah.
We are actually live right now on a local cinema page as well. That's kind of what we do as well. We've had the cast of
fantastic.
Braveheart on stage, and we've screened Braveheart and spoke to some of the cast members of that. So it's definitely up our alley. So if there's ever any plans to come up to Scotland, that's something we'd definitely love to work out. You've got this big cinema that basically it used to be a church, so the even just the feel of it was an old church, and now it's been converted into a 4K cinema with the best sound and a stage and many sofas. It's like a home away from home. And I think
perfect movie watching
would be amazing there. Yeah, especially, I mean, it sucks sometimes. Yeah, we speak to Americans a lot of the time, and we're like, "Oh, if only we could get you over here for a screening." But it's like so far away. But
so
London's
tricky. No, well, we'll have to. Yeah, we should definitely see what we can do. That would be fantastic.
That'd be great. When you wrote the script, did you have a specific cast in mind, or did you just kind of have it? Did you kind of picture them yourself and just kind of go with the flow, so that when you seen the cast, I mean, did you cast? Were you a part of the casting process yourself?
I was, yeah. So I mean, it's kind of an interesting mixture, really, because actually I had worked, well, myself and Phil had worked with Hannah, who plays Patience, previously in the theatre, because my background is, before I wrote Lapwing, which was my kind of feature writing debut, I was predominantly a playwright, and I'd started working with Phil in the world of theatre, and we'd both kind of collaborated with Hannah, who was in a couple of plays that I wrote that Phil directed, and it was a really interesting one of kind of when I started writing Lapwing, I knew it was Hannah. Like, she was always in my mind, and there was this sort of moment, sort of a few weeks into me writing, I think I was nearing having a first draft ready, or it was kind of early days of the process, and there was just this moment where me and Phil kind of both just went, it's Hannah, like it's got to be Hannah, and then then it was just about kind of chatting to her and seeing if it was the sort of role that she'd be interested in, the kind of, I mean, there's so many unusual challenges, I guess, about the role of Patience, not least the fact that she's a non-verbal woman, and what that means. But I mean, Hannah's performance, I think the way that she communicates emotion is just incredible. I mean, she's an incredible performer across the board, but filmically and expressively, she's just a wonderful Patience. So yeah, I always knew that it was her, and I think Phil always had a really clear sense that it was her as well. And then a lot of the other cast were people that Phil had worked with before, some of whom I'd worked with, some of whom I knew and had seen their work and admired it. But the kind of the two other key castings, I guess, really were Emmett and Sebastian D'Souza, who plays Rumi, and they were through a conversation that began with their agents, and they read the script, and luckily kind of really felt that the story spoke to them, and that the characters, they felt that there was a lot about the characters that they kind of wanted to interpret themselves. So that was fantastic, kind of getting them on board, and I think really exciting for everybody, kind of because we were, it's a predominantly kind of local production, working with a lot of locally based actors who are incredible, but perhaps they hadn't necessarily got the profile at that stage that Emmett and Sebastian were working at. So it was brilliant to kind of be collaborating with them. And there was something really interesting as well. I know Phil was kind of saying recently, we were talking about it, and the fact that because Emmett was kind of coming in and he didn't know anybody, whereas a lot of the rest of the team knew each other, had maybe worked together before, there was a real sense of him being quite an unknown entity, which was perfect for David, because he, it kind of increased that sense of tension and uncertainty between him and some of the other characters, not just Lizzie and Patience, but also Lewis Gemmell, who plays Jacob. So it was a really fascinating kind of process, seeing the way that the casting then interacts with the atmosphere on set, and the way that kind of enhances the feel of the piece overall was brilliant.
Yeah, there's always like a wee hierarchy, and I think what was perfectly done with this is the fact that you could see on the pyramid exactly where everybody fit. And I think what the thing is with David, he kind of assumed that Patience was to be like his little, like, one thing, and Jacob even says it, like he's kind of, and he's antagonized by her, because she doesn't speak. And there was just with everyone else, I think David knew he had them where he wanted them, but with her, it was just like, and there was that kind of control thing. It's not so much a battle for power, but it's like he wanted to get in there, and I don't think he knew if he could get in there, and that's kind of where that for me that was kind of cool to see that. We have a few comments here. Philip Stevens, the director himself, says, I'm sure we can have a conversation about that. That sounds great. We should have a chat about that. Definitely. We will.
Get Lapwing up to Scotland. Definitely.
Let's talk. And
also, Philip, I'll just say just now, well done.
Yes, absolutely.
you made a good movie.
Fantastic director. Yeah, it's been such a privilege to work with him. He's such a brilliant, nuanced director. It's very talented man.
It kept me, we'll put it this way, when I was watching it, it kept me glued to the screen, and when it was finished, I thought about it for hours later.
That's really great to hear.
One thing that I would say, just before we read out this comment, one thing I would say was that I actually, when I watched the film, kind of following on from watching the trailer, the film didn't feel the way I expected it to, based on the trailer. The trailer, I thought, looked more like a love story with a little bit of the consequences of that, whereas the film was... It felt like a little bit of love story with a lot of the consequences.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a really interesting one, I think, isn't it? And I know that and Phil would certainly be able to talk about this a lot more than myself as well, because he was so directly involved in the creative decisions that you make in terms of what material you use in a trailer. And it's such an interesting one, isn't it? The way that you present a film to the world. And actually, I think sometimes that if there is a slight difference, actually, I think that's quite nice, because I think there is that element of we were sort of talking a little bit before we came on air as well, weren't we, about the fact that as filmmakers, Phil and I were really interested in defying convention as well, and also defying assumptions. So kind of drawing on what audience expectations might be, but then taking things off in a different direction. And I think actually that's something that, was at the forefront of our minds. And, particularly with the creation of that trailer that very much leans into one aspect of the story without kind of giving too much away about where it goes. It's really interesting to hear you say that you felt that watching the trailer and then seeing the film. That's fascinating.
It kind of felt a little bit like a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, like the disapproving. Well, I mean, at this point, we didn't know who he was. We just knew they were salt farmers. But then when you see it, when you watch the movie, it takes you in another direction, which for me was good, because it does take away from that. Well, we know this story. I've never watched a movie with the same story. There's elements of, you can break down elements of the movie and talk about movies that have similarities, but realistically, like you say, every time you think you're following a road, you take another detour and it takes you somewhere else, which is good, because we don't come across movies that are not quite formulaic in that sense. Jay Mack, can you read this comment, because I cannot pronounce that surname?
I'm going to admit right now that I can't pronounce it either. But let's just say Marek. Marek has a comment. It says, do you believe that Hollywood movies predict the future? Do the films have any message? The bottom line, do they get people used to certain events? Now, I think what he's saying is, basically, if you show people enough of something, well, eventually that when these things become reality, does it make it easier to digest? I think that's what he's getting
that's
at.
exactly what he's saying, and that was a great way of breaking that down, J Mac.
Well, thank you very much.
Very good, yeah. And I think it's so interesting. I think any creative endeavor has such an intimate relationship with what's going on in the world around it, both in terms of what's happening at the present moment, what has happened, and the perception of what might be happening in the future as well. Certainly for me, I think what was really interesting about Lapwing with that process was actually almost retrospectively realizing how relevant or kind of resonant it was to today. I was very much writing a period drama when I was immersed in the script, and I was immersing myself in the fact that I wanted to make this world as authentic as possible. And Phil and I were doing our research, and we found found out about the Egyptian law that was passed in 1555, which was essentially the kind of the first sort of anti-immigration legislation that was passed in this country, which I just found, I mean, firstly, I found it shocking that, I didn't know about that already, and everyone that I spoke to about it, kind of this was brand new information. And so the story kind of unraveled from there, but it was sort of only after I'd kind of emerged from that kind of frenzy of writing a first draft, and me and Phil were talking more and more about it, and preparing notes and changes for the second draft, that we both really realized just how resonant it was of what we were experiencing at the time in terms of where we were at with immigration. And I think even more so now, we're 5 years down the line from when I was writing the screenplay, but if we look at the migrant crisis in this country now, it's still so pertinent. And so I think in terms of the relationship that films and movies have with the past and the present and the future, I think it's really symbiotic, and I think it's always interrelated. I think we're, as creatives, we're influenced all the time by what's going on around us, even when we don't realize it, which was kind of the thing that the realization, I guess, that I had while writing Lapwing, was that I was tapping into things that I didn't even realize I was tapping into at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, especially isolation as well. You wrote that before COVID.
Yeah.
So to Marek's question, yes,
it's mad, isn't it? That became such a thing, and we can all identify a little bit more perhaps than we could with that experience of isolation.
Just on the note of that immigration policy that came up in 1555, it was Queen Mary that come up
Bloody
with this
Mary, they called
decree.
her.
Yeah. Now the film is obviously it's very much coming from the women's point of view. And it's talking about toxic masculinity and the fact that David is literally the worst aspect of every
Not
type
just
of man.
David, not just
and
David.
Jacob in his own little sneaky way.
Spoilers.
But obviously, like, you would expect it to have been a king that came up with this. But the fact that it was a queen, it kind of it skews your perception of the movie a little bit. Like it was a woman that was in power at the time, and she was doing these horrible things. Kevin told me earlier on about something that Queen Mary was up to at the time as well, and it just makes you think, wow, we're all capable of doing some horrible shit.
Thing is, one thing, right, which still stands true, right, and always has throughout humanity, right? The same as I kind of liken it to The Walking Dead, and it's very present in Lapwing as well, right? So in The Walking Dead, you've got a zombie outburst, and yet people still fight each other. Oh, they're still bursting it, right?
I know, burst.
Here we are. The thing is, there is a big issue, yet over here, the human aspect is still to fight each other and screw each other over. So in Lapwing, they're going through this really horrible time to the point where there's people coming seeking help, and they're like, get away from us. You can stay over there. They're treating them like vermin. Right? When realistically, if we all just come together, right, we all just love one another and just get on with life and be accountable for ourselves, life would be so much better. And it seems so simple that it's just so hard to achieve, right?
And
because
it's so,
of what?
I think it's so, I mean, Kevin, without wishing to get kind of deeply political, but I think that's that's exactly what happens in these situations, that people look to divide each other. So because if you divide and you conquer, don't you? Whereas if everyone kind of gets together and goes, well, hang on, yes, we're being told to hate these people over here, but actually if we were to get together with these people, we've probably got a lot more in common than we realize, and we could learn. We could conquer our common foe if we were able to do that, and learn from each other, as you say. But I think there's something so kind of deeply divisive that happens in these kind of situations, especially when such legislations are passed from from above. That that's very much something that I think was interesting to explore within these communities that are at the heart of Lapwing, and the tensions that exist between them, and all of the kind of the paranoia and the uncertainty on both sides as well. Both sides are equally cautious of each other without maybe really knowing why, and really not really understanding whether they're foes to each other, but they've been sort of told that they are, and that's that's enough sometimes, isn't it, to
it's kind of
escalate.
crazy. When you think about it, right, as a child, so if you've got a child that can walk and talk and understand things, right, as a child, if an adult was to come up and say to the child, right, there's going to be a group of kids in here later, but you're not allowed to like the ones that don't live near you, or are this, or look the same as you, or are the same color as you, right? The child would be like, that's stupid. And that's the most innocent of beings. Like, that's so stupid. Don't like them because of this. When realistically, like, an action is what makes a child not like you. It's the action of the individual, right? Not the circumstance. Yeah. So it's I like that it's very, very present in Lapwing. That and another thing as well. There was a part where one of the characters was saying, she's like, just leave. And he's like, no, we can't just leave. And I thought that will serve great to anybody that ever goes through that kind of abuse from any kind of partner or whatever. Because when you're watching it on screen, you're kind of taking yourself out of the box, and you know what's right and wrong. You can put the puzzle pieces together. You can see it as a whole. And I think movies like Lapwing are great for kind of holding a mirror up to society and giving a bit of perspective, that someone that may be going through that kind of stuff may watch Lapwing and say, I can relate to this character, and what she's going through isn't great, so what I'm going through isn't great. So maybe, I think things like that. I mean, I totally believe that's kind of true to that.
Thank you so much for highlighting that.
No, definitely.
I read quite a few of the reviews that have come out, the review articles that have come out about the movie, and one of them in particular was mentioned. The word that it used over and over again was bleak. The film is bleak. It's bleak. It's bleak. But then at the same time, it's inspirational. Now it's it must have been. I mean, was that an intentional thing, like to make it really, really tough, and then just kind of bring it all together at a moment where you just kind of put your fist in the air?
I absolutely. I think again, it's all about the contrasts, and it's all about that moment of finding resilience and finding a sense of empowerment and finding a sense of agency has to feel utterly earned as well. And because of the complexity of the themes that the piece was dealing with, we were just saying a little bit there about the effects of emotional abuse and physical abuse and coercive control. They are not easy situations to be in, and they are very much not easy situations to emerge from for anybody who's experienced them or has known anyone who's experienced them. I think everyone whose lives have been touched by that experience will really empathize with the difficulty of that. And so it felt entirely necessary that this was not an easy film in terms of both the story and what the characters experience. That couldn't be easy for the characters, but it also couldn't be easy for the audience, in terms of I'm it's a hard watch. There are moments of some real brutality that felt utterly necessary to the authenticity of the story, and I think just paying respect to people who have been through such experiences. And I think again, that's something where Hannah and Emmett in particular, and Sarah as Lizzie, their performances just really do kind of lean into the emotional complexity of those times. And that's not an easy thing for an actor to do, to go to those really difficult places, and to have to feel and show those things, but I think they do it in a way that feels very truthful, and I think hopefully enables us to really go on that journey with those characters. So I mean, hopefully, as you say, as we do kind of get to the end, and without wishing to drop too many spoilers, but there is that sense of something coming out of this. It's not just it is bleak, but the bleakness is there in order to serve a story of a coming of age story, and a story of resurgence as well, from the kind of ashes of something terrible, and being able to, the visual and the emotional metaphor of kind of looking out to a new horizon is at the heart of the piece, really.
It absolutely is. And before we let you go, Laura, you've made Lapwing. We've loved it. Everybody that watches it's going to love it. What do you see next? Is there another topic? Is there something else? Do you want to go a completely different route? What, as a writer, what can we expect from you next?
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time now, because Phil and I are working on our next feature collaboration, which is going to be dealing with some similar themes. So again, in the same way, the correlation really between female experience and kind of toxic masculinity is once again going to be something that we very much lean into with this new piece, but we're going for a modern setting this time, which is going to be exciting, but one that's going to be really rich with the past, really, and with mythology and folklore. So we're actually going to be doing a folk horror, which is really exciting. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I think we're really excited, both creatively for the story and the characters, but also for the kind of maybe the more technical challenges of a folk horror, a slightly bigger budget, looking to make those next steps in terms of our careers and where we want to be within the industry. So it's a really exciting time, but it feels like, I think it's taken a bit of time to sort of decide on the right project that's going to come next, but it really feels like we found it now, so it's exciting.
That's amazing.
You mentioned budget there for a second. Again, just before you go, what was the budget for Lapwing?
Oh my god! Oh no! I'm gonna get caught out on a question right at the end. Phil, quick! If you're in the comments, help me.
Excuse me.
I mean, we had a tiny budget in terms of getting into the shoot itself. I think, again, Phil will correct me if I'm wrong, but we went into the shoot with around 30K shooting budget, so it was tiny.
Wow.
I think the film overall is coming in at around 100 to 120K. So obviously still super low budget, especially for a period feature. But it's we're certainly looking to kind of do a few more things and push a few more boundaries with the folk horror, and really lean into hopefully being able to do some pretty cool things with that genre as well.
It was the first thing that went through my head was like, I knew this was a low budget production, almost a micro budget. It's a period piece, and as soon as you go period, you're adding money straight away, because your costuming, you need to make sure you're getting locations that are just going to be completely unaffected by modern society and stuff like that. It just adds money. So it's impressive that you managed to do it on that kind of budget.
Yeah, no, I think it was, again, and that's testament, to some of the incredible creatives that we worked with. I mean, we worked with an amazing historical costumier who's Pauline Loven, who was just incredible.
Great
but
job.
also, we were she did an amazing job. But we were so blessed as well with the landscape, as I said before. It really is. So you can go to the Lincolnshire coast where we filmed, and you could be at any time. There is nothing to kind of indicate that it's 2021 or 1555. So apart from the occasional dog walker and planes going overhead, that was about it.
I did think about that.
What are you doing?
That's amazing. Yourself and Philip are a dream team, so we'll definitely be following everything you guys do next. Really looking forward to your next project, especially that it's a horror. It's been an absolute blast having you on. We've really enjoyed watching Lapwing. We're going to definitely keep our audience on the ball, guys. If you're watching at home, and if you're listening to us in the archives on Spotify, wherever, go to Sky Movies, go to Amazon Prime, go ahead and check out Apple TV, everywhere you can get it. Lapwing, you need to go and check out. We are telling you to go and watch it. We've never sold you guys a bad movie yet, so do it. Support this like you support every other one, and let's help keep independent movies alive, because that's where the real art comes. It's not all that CGI super stuff. That's been amazing. Thanks again, Laura, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we hope to speak to you again soon. All right.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, guys. Thanks
again, Laura. Have a great
night.
Bye.
Thank you.
That was amazing. How often do you get to speak to someone that wrote not only just a movie or created a movie, but like a movie like Lapwing? Really enjoyed it. For everybody watching at home, make sure you check it out. I know people are like, oh, I've got Netflix and it's no there and I pay this already. It's worth the money. Rent it. Go and see it. You used to do it. You used to do it when there's DVD shops down the street. Go ahead and do it. And if you dislike it, Jay Mack will give you back all the money you spent on it. Okay.
Yeah, and then Kevin will come in your house, chap on the door, and take it back off you again.
Oh well. But you need to go ahead and check out Lapwing. It's brilliant. We got another comment there, Philip Stevens. No, clap to you guys, Jay Mack.
Yeah,
clap.
absolutely. And Philip, please get in touch as well. We'd love to speak to you if we can get the chance. So send us an email, jibberjabberscotland@gmail.com. And we'll be happy to chat and get you on, and we can certainly speak about the cinema thing.
Absolutely. It'd be pretty cool to do this live with a nice wee set, and we've got all the bits and bobs we need to make that happen. And I know the guys that are watching are very local to where we are, so it won't be hard to fill that up, especially if somebody's already seen Lapwing. But I'm really looking forward to what those guys do next. It was real fun. Real fun. Like it was fun to watch because I was invested. I was invested in it. Which is something you don't get all the time. But thanks again, guys. I know it's Friday night and everybody's out now that they can be out for tuning in, and we will see you next. Exactly. We will see you guys next week, where I'm going to go ahead and see if Gary Smart's going to come back on, because we have Dark Ditties to talk about. Anybody that's not seen Dark Ditties, check out Dark Ditties. It's on Amazon Prime. Absolutely amazing. Just as leaving, Phillips Stevens says, love to, guys. Well, that's a conversation we're going to have. Let's chat. For this evening, I have been Kev, as always. J Mac.
I have been me also.
Enjoy the rest of your night, guys, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
That was the ugliest face I've ever made. Do you see that?
Go do it. Wait, no, do it again. Do it again. Get your screenshots, lads. See Matthew Man. I'll be on that one. Love, guys. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Lapwing. Check it out.
Oh, I've not even got anything today. Sorry. See you next